may not be, we should not charge them, right? So when we talk about pricing, we can always also include that those who cannot afford, and if it is bare minimum for their survival, right, we should not be talking about charging for that, right? Should not be talking about pricing for that. And that's why in this particular discussion, we have only looked at pricing for industrial uses, commercial uses, and horticulture uses. Okay, to my mind, horticulture also these days is a proposition which the high level society only uses it. Okay, so a lot of treated wastewater or water that you use. Okay, so for these three purposes, at least initially to start with, we can have a pricing policy, right? And if you really want to have something good and your wastewater has to be, STPs to be maintained, that infrastructure to be maintained and operated, we have to have a pricing policy such that the cost of the fresh water, the price of the fresh water should be more than the price of the treated water that we, only then this recycle, reuse paradigm will come. So with this introductory remark, I leave it to the panelists to give us at the end of the panel discussion, through the moderator of the panelists, right, tell us to the IIT team in what direction we should work on. So the idea of this panel discussion is essentially that, and once we are able to articulate that properly, we will be able to take it forward, and if it can be implemented in Ganga Basin, probably we can replicate it elsewhere. So this is the background of this particular discussion, and now I leave it to Suru. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tare. My name is Subramaniam, and I head everything about water, one of the leading publishing, training, consulting, and knowledge sources on water and wastewater management in India for the last 12 years. It is my pleasure and honor to moderate this session on this extremely important topic of costing and pricing of water. And I feel I have a fairly easy task. And I say I have an easy task because we have a fairly distinguished panel of eminent experts from various fields connected to this topic, who can give a varied perspective on this complex issue of costing and pricing. And I think I trust them to be able to really enliven this discussion. I think as per the session objectives which had been specified by Dr. Tare and mentioned in the catalog, I think what I would look at deriving out of this session would be seeking to measure and account for the true cost of water, what that means, what all elements should that keep in mind, which can be then the basis for any kind of a pricing mechanism for the industrial, commercial, and horticultural users of that water. We'll look at whether developing the polluter pays concept and developing various pricing frameworks to drive that recycling and water conservation initiative is possible. We'll try to discuss that as a part of the agenda. And the objective, in my opinion, would be to suggest certain specific solutions for using this cost pricing paradigm to further develop the water and wastewater sector in India. That is what I have sort of looked at as the core objective of this session. Before we start, I'd like to maybe start with a quick straw poll of the audience. I would like to raise a starting question in terms of how many people in the audience feel on the very basic question that pricing of water should be linked to the cost. How many of you feel pricing should be linked to cost? All those in agreement could raise their hands. I would take that to be a 70%, Dr. Tare. So I think I'd leave it to the panelists to be able to reinforce that view or to bring about a change in the mind of the audience, and if we have time at the end, we'll try to take a poll again to see if there is a change of opinion on that point. Sort of quick ground rules in terms of the session. I think we have roughly about 15 minutes or so that we could look at for each session. And my request to all the panelists would be to try to keep that time frame as much as possible. I think we wouldn't want to disturb the flow of the discussion, which is actually probably more important. So I wouldn't want to come in and apply a time break, but I would like if you could have that kind of a time frame in mind when you're making the presentation or having the talk. And we'll follow a schedule, if it's okay with all of you, of starting with Mr. Krishna Kumar, then we'll go with Dr. Asolkar, we'll then go with Dr. Onkar Mittal, and then go with Mr. Vikram Soni. We have a couple of other panelists who are expected to join in, who could then follow in after these 4 speakers. And I would also request the panelists if you could focus specifically on some of the solution points to this whole issue of cost and pricing. We can start with Mr. Krishna Kumar. Mr. Krishna Kumar has his expertise in the area of strategic planning, worked for many years with Caltex, and then also been driving the strategy function at the Thunderbolt Institute in the US, and brings in a whole perspective on this issue of cost and pricing.
Thank you.
Mr. Krishna Kumar, would you like to stand and use, or is this needed?
No,
You can, or do you need a pointer, sir? Please.
Much indeed for the opportunity to make this presentation. I wish to thank Professor Thare, Mr. Subramaniam, and these others for giving me this opportunity to go first. I decided to go first primarily because I have some diagrams to demonstrate what we can do in this area. Let me start with the first slide. As you see here, I suppose you can read some of the numbers here. What I paid for water in Indian rupees in India and America. India, water and power, I paid for in Bombay, Mumbai, 10 rupees 65 paise. As opposed to in America, I pay for the same kiloliter, 24 rupees 90 paise. It just shows that water in India, in such a city prima Indis, that is Bombay, is the most expensive city. Even then it's much cheaper, about 40% of what it is in America. And Phoenix is not equal to Bombay in terms of size. It's a smaller city, and yet I'm charged 24 rupees 90 paise, or almost 25 rupees. Power also, if you take power into consideration, I paid 3 rupees 15 paise for kilowatt hour, or 1 unit, whereas in Bombay I paid 12 rupees 21 paise. So it's very quixotic how India is very different from United States. Power costs much less in America, and water costs much more in America. It's a good paradigm. So India can also consider that there's nothing wrong in paying somewhat higher for unit cost, so far as water is concerned. We go to the next slide. Developed countries have, as you see here, agricultural 30%, industrial 59%, and water used 11% for domestic, whereas developing countries, 82% agricultural, 10% industrial, domestic 8%. Which just shows we have a long way to go. This is in general for domestic countries, developing countries. We go to the next slide, which talks about India. Water for industrial use in India, as you see in 2010, billion cubic meters. 693 billion cubic meters, or I call it kiloliters, 600 billion kiloliters, 693, of which 536 for irrigation. Industrial is very small, still a small component in India, 41 billion kiloliters, and then 116 for all the others. And then it goes up, of course, by 2025, but it just shows it's 41 billion kiloliters. And then you see here, out of 41 billion kiloliters, these figures are 5 years earlier, 2004, 2005. I could not get the 2010 numbers. Thermal power plants consume a lot, 87.9%. Engineering and all that. And then as you see here, some of the fertilizer, sugar, pulp and paper consume a lot. And finally you come to that, wastewater released by these industries is 76.8% of the total. So they take 40,000 cubic, 40,013 million cubic meters. They discharge 30,729, which is significant. It has to be treated. This is the one to be treated. Pardon me? India. This is all India. Adherence to ZLD, enlightenment in India with industry. I'm just giving this as an example here. Sanmar Chemplast in Mettur Dam in Tamil Nadu. Capital investment is about 28 crores. Sanmar, they also have Kadalur, Tamil Nadu and Sanmar. They have desalination water. They are not using the aquifers in these two, Kadalur and Karaikal. And they do not use that. And even in the Chemplast, their volume is about 1,839 kiloliters per day in Chemplast. And it cost them 28 crores. Now I'm giving you an example. Some years ago, as a professor of global business at Thunderbird, the American Graduate School of International Management, I was confronted with a study from Chevron. There was a water treatment desalination plant in Long Beach, California. Chevron had oil and water mixing. They wanted to clean up the place. And see, the capital expenditure is a modular plant. You can go on increasing, given the volume involved. The volume is 1,336 kiloliters per day. And capital expenditure, $450,000 turns out to be US cents, 33 cents per kiloliter. Tariff charged 59 cents. Chevron was prepared to pay 59 cents per kiloliter. And operating cost is 33 cents, depreciation 9 cents, taxes paid per kiloliter 5 cents, net margin per kiloliter 12 cents. And the power cost is out of 33 cents of power cost, out of 33 cents of capital, out of 33 cents of operating cost, power cost alone was 24 cents. It's a significant amount. And so, and the weighted average cost of capital is 24%, 12% here. The project yielded the net present value $227 million, $227,000, net present value at the terminal value 90%, and then net present value of Long Beach project 227, internal rate of return 22.68%, internal rate of return nominal, real, simple payback period 3.55 years, simple payback period real 3.82 years, present worth netback period, present worth payback period is 5 years, present worth index. Present worth index is the bang for the buck. You put in $1, what is the return? It's not much, 1.64. Present worth payback period is 5 years. That is discounted cash flow payback period. The reason I'm giving you all these numbers is industry wants these numbers. If you're going to put up your capital investment, here for example, India needs capital investment as well as the technology. I think the 12th plan calls for an outlay of about $930 billion, almost $1 trillion, of which power generation is about $160 billion. And I think water, cleaning effluent water and all that, many people give different numbers, but it's about, say, $50 billion. $50 billion is a lot of money to be raised in India. You need capital investment has to flow from outside, as well as the technology. If that is the case, the person who puts up capital investment at 50, here you see here, the return for investment is how many cents? The previous slide you go, the return for investment is, net margin is 12 cents. He's charging 59 cents, say take it as 60 cents, about 32 rupees per kiloliter. And he still wants to make some reasonable profit. His profit margin is very small, 12 cents. So you need that kind of a profitability to make it work. Now I come to the last two slides. One is what is the tornado diagram? It tells you what the principal drivers are. I have a special software which does a sensitivity analysis, what you call a tornado diagram. It tells you what the principal drivers are. The first driver on the left-hand side, as you see here, the first driver